A single candle flickers in a stone chamber, casting long shadows from a figure in a white mantle. This is the world of the Knights Templar, but the story you know is only the surface. They were not merely warrior monks of the Crusades. They were the rumored guardians of a forbidden spiritual knowledge, erased from history and shrouded in whispers. By the end of this journey, you will understand the real and startling evidence behind their secret rites, separating medieval fact from centuries of occult legend. We will uncover why a king destroyed them with accusations of idol worship and what they might have truly discovered beneath an ancient temple. What does it mean to pursue a truth so dangerous it must be hidden in stone and symbol? The year was 1119. In the dusty aftermath of the First Crusade, a French knight named Hugues de Payens, along with 8 companions, made a solemn vow before the Patriarch of Jerusalem. Their mission was deceptively simple: to protect the vulnerable pilgrims traveling the dangerous roads between the Mediterranean coast and the Holy City. They called themselves the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, a name derived from their headquarters on the Temple Mount. They were monks, but they were also warriors, a radical fusion that had never truly existed before. King Baldwin II of Jerusalem granted them quarters in the royal palace, part of the ancient Al-Aqsa Mosque complex, believed by the Crusaders to be the ruins of Solomon's temple. From this sacred and mysterious ground, their legend would grow. Their rise was meteoric. Within a decade, the Council of Troyes officially recognized their order, granting them a unique rule written by the great Cistercian abbot, Saint Bernard of Clairvaux. This rule was strict, demanding poverty, chastity, and obedience, but it also sanctified their military purpose. They became the first true warrior monks, a spiritual army. And then came the privileges. In 1139, Pope Innocent II issued a papal bull known as Omni Datum Optimum. This decree was a seismic shift in power. It placed the Templars under the direct and exclusive authority of the Pope himself, freeing them from the control of local bishops, kings, and even the Patriarch of Jerusalem. They answered to no earthly power but the Vatican. This independence was absolute and unprecedented. With this divine mandate came immense material wealth. Donations of land, money, and sons from noble families flooded in from across Europe. They developed an early international banking system where a pilgrim could deposit funds in London and withdraw them in Jerusalem using a coded letter of credit. Their network of preceptories or commanderies became fortified economic hubs spanning the continent. They were, in essence, the first multinational corporation, a hybrid of a holy order, a standing army, and a financial institution. This combination of spiritual authority, martial discipline, political independence, and staggering wealth made them uniquely powerful, and it is precisely this unique position that makes the subsequent accusations against them so compelling. An organization that answers only to a distant pope, that controls vast secrets of finance and logistics, that operates from the very foundations of Solomon's temple, becomes the perfect canvas upon which rumors of deeper, hidden knowledge can be painted. What might such an order, untouchable by kings, have discovered or created in the shadows of its own power? Yet this immense power cast a long and dangerous shadow. From the pinnacle of their influence, the Templars' fall was as swift as it was brutal, and it began with a single, chilling date, Friday, October the 13th, 1307. Before dawn, royal agents across France moved simultaneously, executing sealed orders from King Philip IV. Every Templar knight, sergeant, and chaplain they could find was seized, dragged from their beds in a coordinated strike of shocking efficiency. The charges read aloud were designed to horrify the medieval mind, to paint the order not as flawed soldiers, but as monstrous heretics, they were accused of secretly renouncing Christ and spitting on the cross during their initiation rites. They were said to worship a mysterious idol, often described as a bearded head called Baphomet. The accusations detailed forced homosexual acts and claimed the brothers practiced obscene kisses during their ceremonies. For a society built on the bedrock of faith, these were not just crimes, they were a spiritual contagion. This was the explosive moment the idea of Templar secret rites was catapulted from whispered rumor into official history. King Philip, deeply in debt to the order and covetous of their wealth, certainly had a financial motive, but by choosing these specific, sacrilegious charges, he did something far more profound. He weaponized the public's latent suspicion of any secretive, powerful group. He transformed a financial and political conflict into a holy war, ensuring popular support for his actions. The trial records that followed, extracted often under torture, created a contradictory and terrifying paper trail. Some brothers confessed to everything, only to later recant. Others died defiantly, maintaining their innocence and their faith. This chaos of testimony is the primary source material we have, a murky blend of coercion, fantasy, and possibly fragments of truth. The question that has echoed for centuries is this: why these particular accusations? Were they entirely fabricated, a smear campaign of the highest order, or did they grotesquely distort some genuine private ritual that was utterly misunderstood? The shadow of Friday the 13th forever changed the Templar story, turning their history into a puzzle where the charges themselves became the first and most important clue. The confessions that emerged from those dark cells are a historian's nightmare and a conspiracy theorist's playground. Under the relentless pressure of torture, broken men spoke of rituals that seemed to confirm every dark rumor. The Grand Master himself, Jacques de Molay, initially confessed to some of the charges, as did hundreds of his brothers. They spoke of being ordered to deny Christ and spit on the cross during their initiation, an act of supposed renunciation that could also be interpreted as a brutal test of absolute obedience. They described being told to kiss the receiving official, not on the mouth, but on the lower back, the navel, and sometimes on the mouth, acts framed as perverse, but which some modern scholars suggest might have been distorted descriptions of a ritual of humility, a symbolic act of servitude grotesquely misrepresented by inquisitors. Then there was the cord. Many brothers confessed to being given a small cord, worn perpetually around the waist under their shirts. This cord, they said, had first been touched to or wrapped around a mysterious idol in their chapter meetings, imbuing it with a sacred, or in the eyes of the accusers, a profane power. This detail of a consecrated talisman, a personal object charged with secret meaning, is a classic hallmark of esoteric practice, but the centerpiece of the accusations, the element that has fueled 7 centuries of speculation, was the idol itself. The interrogators called it Baphomet. The descriptions varied wildly: a bearded male head, a skull, a figure with 3 faces, a cat, or simply a painted panel. Some said it was made of wood, others of metal. Some claimed it spoke and made the land fertile. This chaotic, shifting image is key. If this was a genuine object of Templar veneration, why could no one consistently describe it? The lack of a single, clear description suggests either a collective fantasy implanted by leading questions, or something far more intriguing, a symbolic representation not meant to be taken literally. The name Baphomet itself is a puzzle. It appears nowhere in Templar documents before the trials. Some linguists propose it is a medieval French corruption of Muhammad, or Muhammad, implying the Templars had secretly turned to Islam, a potent charge for the time. Others, particularly in later occult traditions, would break the word down to a cipher, a symbolic formula. The reliability of all this testimony is profoundly compromised. Medieval judicial torture was designed not to find truth, but to produce a specific confession. The questions were leading, the pain was unbearable, and the template of heresy was well established by the Inquisition. A brother might be shown a list of expected blasphemies and asked which ones he committed, yet the sheer consistency of some details across widely separated locations gives pause. Could every single detail have been fabricated and implanted perfectly, or does it point to a core of genuine, private ritual that was utterly alien to the outside world and thus easily misinterpreted as diabolical? These confessions, extracted in agony, remain the shaky foundation upon which the entire edifice of Templar esotericism is built. They are less a record of fact and more a dark mirror, reflecting the deepest fears of the medieval world and the terrifying power of a state to define reality. To understand what these rites might have truly been, we must look away from the torture chambers and toward the places the Templars themselves built. The name Baphomet is a ghost, haunting the space between a political lie and a profound symbol. In the cold court records of the 14th century, it was not a detailed image, but a whispered accusation, a word spat out by interrogators. Most credible historians see it as a simple mangling of Muhammad, the medieval French term for the prophet Muhammad. For King Philip's prosecutors, this was the perfect charge, painting the Templars as secret apostates who had turned from Christ to embrace the faith of their enemies in the Holy Land. It was a heresy designed to maximize outrage, yet something strange happened in the centuries that followed. This legal fiction refused to die. It seeped into folklore and grimoires, a blank canvas waiting for an artist. That artist arrived in the 19th century. His name was Eliphas Lévy, a French occultist and former seminarian who sought to unify all magical traditions into a single coherent philosophy. In his 1854 book, Dogma and Ritual of High Magic, Lévy did not merely describe Baphomet. He gave it a form that would eclipse all others. He drew a majestic, androgynous goat-headed figure, seated, with one arm pointing up and the other down, a pentagram on its forehead, and a torch blazing between its horns. This was not a medieval devil, but a symbolic embodiment of the universal equilibrium of opposites, male and female, human and animal, divine and earthly, good and evil reconciled into a higher whole. Lévy explicitly called this symbol the Baphomet of the Templars. In one breathtaking act of creative synthesis, he transformed a prosecutor's slur into the central icon of modern occultism. This transformation is the key to understanding the entire esoteric legacy of the order. The historical Templars, whether guilty of secret rites or not, almost certainly never worshipped Lévy's intricate symbol. But by attaching it to them, Lévy performed a kind of alchemy. He took the raw material of their persecution, the very accusations meant to destroy them, and repurposed it as evidence of their hidden wisdom. In the modern occult view, the Templars were no longer heretics, they were initiates. Their alleged denial of Christ was reinterpreted as a rejection of empty dogma in pursuit of a deeper, older truth. Their supposed idol worship became a metaphor for their veneration of sacred knowledge, perhaps a hidden Gnostic gospel or a mystical understanding of the divine feminine. Lévy's Baphomet became the proof not of their crime, but of their enlightenment. This symbolic rebirth shows how the Templar story became a mirror. For the medieval church, they reflected the threat of hidden corruption. For the 19th century occult revival, they reflected the ideal of the secret society preserving ancient wisdom against a hostile orthodoxy. The truth of their rituals may be lost to the fire and the rack, but the power of their symbol endures, a testament to humanity's endless desire to find hidden patterns in the chaos of history. To step inside a Templar preceptory on the night of an initiation is to walk a line between documented confession and profound mystery. The ceremony described in the trial records follows a grim, ritualized sequence. A postulant, a man seeking to join the order, would be brought before a chapter of assembled brothers. According to the accusations, the first command was the most shocking. The senior official would order the new brother to deny Christ, the very Savior he had sworn to defend. He would then be told to spit upon the cross, sometimes a crucifix brought into the room for this purpose. Following this act of symbolic betrayal came the kiss. The postulant was instructed to kiss the official who received him, not as a brotherly greeting, but on the lower back, the navel, and finally on the mouth. Finally, he was given the sacred cord, the small rope to be worn under his tunic at all times, which was said to have been consecrated by contact with the mysterious head idol. This was the narrative of a systematic, secret heresy, but to understand what it might have actually been, we must hold it up against the light of a normal, orthodox monastic profession of the same era. In a standard Benedictine or Cistercian ceremony, a postulant would undergo a ritual of humility and death to the self. He would prostrate himself before the altar, be questioned on his resolve, and be clothed in the habit of the order, a symbol of his new life. The rituals were solemn, public, and deeply symbolic, designed to reinforce doctrine, not to subvert it. So what do we make of the Templar accusations? One compelling theory is that of the ultimate obedience test. The Templars were not just monks, they were soldiers in a brutal, holy war. Absolute, unthinking obedience to one's commander could mean the difference between life and death on a battlefield in the desert. By ordering a brother to perform a heretical act he found utterly repulsive, and having him obey without question, the order would be forging a weapon of perfect discipline. The renunciation and the spitting would not be beliefs, but a brutal theater, proving the candidate valued the order's command above even his own salvation. It is a dark, pragmatic interpretation. Another, more esoteric theory suggests these acts were not desecrations at all, but deeply misunderstood symbols. In some ancient Gnostic and mystical traditions, the outward form of religion, the dogma and the icon, must be spiritually transcended to reach a direct experience of the divine. A ritual denial of the symbol, the cross, could paradoxically be an act honoring a higher, ineffable truth beyond it. The kiss, in certain esoteric lineages, is a symbol of the transmission of secret wisdom or spiritual breath from master to disciple. And the cord, it is a nearly universal symbol of connection, a personal talisman linking the wearer to the collective power and purpose of the brotherhood. To an outside inquisitor, trained to see the world in rigid binaries of orthodox and heretic, these nuanced acts would be incomprehensible. They would only see the surface action, spit on the cross, and categorize it as pure evil. The terrifying beauty of this puzzle is that both theories could contain a grain of truth. The rites could have been a brutal obedience test that, over generations, absorbed fragments of the strange spiritual ideas the order encountered in the East, creating a unique and secret tradition that was, in the end, entirely their own. The true treasure of the Knights Templar may not have been gold, but a secret buried in stone. For 9 years, from their founding in 1119, these 9 knights lived in the stables beneath the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the Temple Mount, a site they fervently believed was the ruins of Solomon's Temple. Historical chronicles note a curious fact. During this period, they conducted no military campaigns. They admitted no new members. So what were these 9 men doing for nearly a decade? Many believe they were digging. The Temple Mount was a legendary repository of sacred relics. According to Jewish tradition, King Solomon had constructed hidden chambers and labyrinthine tunnels beneath the first temple to safeguard its most holy objects. When the Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem in 586 BC, these treasures, including the fabled Ark of the Covenant, were said to have been hidden, never to be found by the conquerors. The Templars, as the new masters of the site, would have had both the motive and the opportunity to search for these ancient prizes. While no contemporary document states they found the Ark or a chest of gold, their behavior immediately after this 9-year period is telling. They suddenly emerged, traveled to Europe, received official papal sanction, and began growing at an explosive rate. This dramatic shift has fueled the persistent legend of a great discovery, a catalyst that transformed them from 9 obscure knights into a preeminent power. But if it wasn't literal treasure, what could it have been? Some theories point to ancient texts. The Temple Mount was a crossroads of civilizations, a place where Jewish, early Christian, and even Islamic mystical traditions intersected. Could the Knights have uncovered scrolls or codices containing alternative spiritual teachings, perhaps Gnostic gospels rejected by the mainstream church, or advanced knowledge of sacred geometry and architecture? This idea of a textual discovery is compelling because it provides a plausible source for any esoteric rites they may have later developed. Knowledge, especially forbidden knowledge, is a far more dangerous and lasting treasure than gold. It explains why an order of warrior monks might suddenly develop complex, secretive rituals. They were acting as guardians of a wisdom they deemed too potent for the outside world. The legend of their excavation creates a powerful narrative bridge. It takes the abstract idea of secret knowledge and gives it a physical origin point, a literal hole in the ground from which their unique spiritual path may have sprung. It transforms their story from one of mere political rise into an archaeological mystery, suggesting that the true source of their power and the reason for their destruction was not in their banks, but beneath their feet. Buried for 7 centuries in the Vatican's secret archives, a single document rewrites the final act of the Templar tragedy. It is known as the Chinon Parchment, dated August 17, 1308. In it, Pope Clement V, after conducting his own private inquiry, granted absolution to the highest leaders of the order, including Grand Master Jacques de Molay. He found them guilty of minor disciplinary faults, but he explicitly absolved them of the charge of heresy, restoring them to the sacraments of the Church. This is a staggering fact. The Pope himself, in a secret proceeding, cleared the men whom the King of France was publicly burning as servants of the devil. So why did this absolution not save them? The parchment was filed away, hidden, while the public trial and executions continued. 5 years later, under immense political pressure from King Philip, Pope Clement finally issued the bull that officially dissolved the Knights Templar. He did not condemn them to the flames himself, but he handed them over to the secular authorities, who would. This papal vacillation is deafening. It speaks of a man caught between spiritual authority and raw political power, a puppet whose strings were pulled by a vengeful king. But there is another, more tantalizing possibility hidden within this ambiguity. What if Pope Clement, in his private interviews with the Templar leaders, heard something that confused him? What if he encountered a form of belief or practice that was deeply unorthodox, strange, even unsettling to mainstream doctrine, but which he could not, in good conscience, define as outright heresy? Perhaps the Templars described a mystical, experiential Christianity, one that emphasized a direct, personal encounter with the divine over ritual and dogma. They may have spoken of rituals not of denial, but of transcendence, using shocking symbols to break the mind free from conventional thought. To a pope trained in scholastic theology, this would have been dangerously irregular, a spiritual wildness he could not endorse. Yet, recognizing the sincerity in the eyes of these broken warriors, he may have hesitated to call it diabolical. The Chinon Parchment, then, is not just a record of political cowardice. It is a fragile window into a moment where the official church peered into the secret heart of the Templars and could not definitively name what it saw. It suggests that the truth of their rites lay in a gray area, somewhere between orthodox piety and forbidden knowledge, a place so ambiguous that even the Pope chose to hide his judgment from the world. That hidden absolution sealed in the Chinon parchment did not stay the hand of fate. On a small island in the River Seine, in March of 1314, the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar, Jacques de Molay, was burned at the stake. As the flames rose, legend claims he issued a terrible curse, summoning both Pope Clement V and King Philip IV to meet him before the judgment of God within the year. This moment, more than any other, cemented the Templar story into the realm of mythic vengeance, and the date chosen for their mass arrest has echoed through history with a peculiar power: Friday, October the 13th. In the modern imagination, this single day has become synonymous with bad luck, a superstition whose roots are often traced directly back to the Templars' downfall. While historians note that the fear of Friday the 13th is a later fusion of older traditions, the symbolic weight is undeniable. The order was struck down on a day that now universally signifies misfortune, forever linking their fate to a number charged with mystery. That number, 13, is woven into the very fabric of their origins. The original founding band under Hugues de Payens was not a round dozen, but 9 knights. Yet, when they received their official rule at the Council of Troyes, their number is traditionally recounted as 13, mirroring Christ and his 12 apostles. This symbolic apostolic company was a powerful statement, framing themselves as a new spiritual knighthood chosen for a divine mission. In esoteric thought, 13 is a number of profound transition. It follows the completeness of 12, the signs of the zodiac or the months of the year, and thus represents the step into the unknown, the hidden 13th step that leads to a higher plane. It is also intimately tied to the lunar cycle, with roughly 13 full moons in a solar year, connecting it to rhythms of secrecy, intuition, and feminine wisdom often suppressed by the medieval church. For a secretive order rumored to guard hidden knowledge, operating in a 13-month lunar calendar would be a powerful, silent rebuke to the rigid solar calendar of Rome. The legend of Templar revenge adds a final, chilling layer of numerical poetry to their story. According to the tale born from de Molay's fiery curse, cosmic justice was swift. Pope Clement V, who had dissolved the order, died of a sudden illness just 1 month later, in April of 1314. King Philip IV, the architect of the entire persecution, died in a hunting accident before the year was out. Whether by divine judgment or grim coincidence, the swift demise of the 2 men most responsible for the order's destruction provided a perfect narrative closure that history rarely offers. For esotericists, this was not coincidence, but the working of a deeper law. It was the number 13 fulfilling its role as an agent of upheaval and karmic reckoning. The curse completed a symbolic cycle. The 13 original apostles of the new knighthood had been betrayed, and in the 13th year of the 14th century, their betrayers fell. This interpretation transforms the Templars from mere historical actors into agents of a timeless, moral mathematics, where their very destruction proved the potency of the hidden principles they were said to embody. Their legacy, therefore, is not one that ended on a pyre, but one that entered the realm of number and symbol, where it could live on, forever powerful and forever unresolved. The ashes of the last pyre had barely cooled when the whispers began. While the official order was dissolved, its vast network did not simply vanish into thin air. Stories persist of Templar ships slipping away from French ports in the dead of night, their holds laden not with gold bullion, but with something far more precious, their secret archives and sacred relics. This legend of the fleeing fleet is the cornerstone of the idea that the order's core knowledge survived its physical destruction. One persistent thread leads north to Scotland. In 1314, the same year Jacques de Molay was executed, Scotland was under papal interdict, meaning the Pope's authority held little weight there. It is said that knights found refuge with King Robert the Bruce, who was himself excommunicated. Some even claim a contingent of Templars fought at the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, turning the tide for Scotland. While hard evidence is scant, the connection is cemented in later Masonic lore, which would heavily incorporate Templar symbolism and claim a direct lineage through Scottish stonemason guilds that supposedly sheltered the knights. This creates a plausible, if shadowy, path for their esoteric ideas to travel underground. A far clearer and documented survival happened in Portugal. There, King Denis I refused to persecute the Templars, recognizing their value. After years of diplomacy, he secured a papal decree in 1319 that allowed the order's members, assets, and structure to be seamlessly transferred into a new organization, the Order of Christ. This new order, with its familiar red cross pate, became the driving force behind Portugal's Age of Discovery. Prince Henry the Navigator was its Grand Master, and the caravels that sailed into the unknown, like those of Vasco da Gama, bore the distinctive Templar cross on their sails. Here, the continuation is not clandestine at all, but state-sponsored. The Knights' maritime expertise, their financial acumen, and their culture of sacred mission were directly channeled into exploring new worlds. One must wonder, did their rumored secret knowledge of ancient geography or celestial navigation also sail with them? Another intriguing legend points to the heart of Europe, to Switzerland. Folk tales speak of a group of fleeing Templars finding sanctuary in the remote Alpine valleys. There, they supposedly used their martial skills and organizational genius to help local cantons secure their freedom, laying the groundwork for the legendary Swiss Guard and the nation's famed neutrality and banking prowess. The white cross on a red field of the Swiss flag is sometimes, albeit controversially, linked to the inverse of the Templar red cross on white. Whether historically precise or not, these stories fulfill a deep narrative need. They provide an explanation for the sudden emergence of Swiss excellence in fields the Templars had mastered: finance and disciplined defense. The true treasure they carried, these tales suggest, was not a chest of coins, but a blueprint for building a resilient, independent society. This diaspora, whether factual or mythical, is the essential bridge. It answers the critical question that haunts any secret society narrative. How did the knowledge survive the purge? By scattering to the fringes of Europe, to Scotland, Portugal, and the Alps. The essence of the Templars, their rituals, their symbols, and their unique blend of spirituality and pragmatism did not die. It went aground. It seeped into the foundations of other institutions, from guilds to royal navies to fledgling republics. This silent transmission, this hidden continuity, is what allows later groups in the 18th and 19th centuries to plausibly point back and say, "We are the inheritors." The stage is now set for a rebirth, not of a military order, but of an idea, waiting for a new language of symbols to give it voice once more. Their buildings are the silent scriptures of their faith. To understand what the Templars truly believed, we must stop reading the words of their accusers and start reading the stones they left behind. Across Europe and the Holy Land, their commanderies and churches stand as a permanent, coded record of a spirituality far more complex than the simple warrior monk. Take the Temple Church in London, consecrated in 1185. From the outside, its round nave is immediately striking. This rotunda form was a direct echo of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, but also, and more provocatively, of the Dome of the Rock, which stood on the Temple Mount where they made their home. The circular design was not common in Western Europe at the time. It spoke of the East, of a sacred geometry centered on the circle, a symbol of unity, eternity, and the divine perfection they may have encountered there. Step inside, and you are surrounded by stern, beautiful effigies of armored knights lying in repose, but look closer at the capitals of the columns, at the stonework framing the windows. You might find the carved face of the Green Man, an ancient pagan symbol of rebirth and the untamed life force of nature, peering out from the sacred Christian space. This is no accident. It is a statement. In Tamar, Portugal, at the Convento de Cristo, the evidence becomes overwhelming. This was the headquarters of the Order of Christ, the direct successor to the Portuguese Templars. The Charola, their original 12-sided rotunda church, is a masterpiece of esoteric design. It is not aligned to the east like a standard Christian church, but has a deliberate, subtle offset. Scholars have found its architecture encodes precise astronomical alignments, with specific windows or portals designed to catch the light of the solstice sun or a particular star on a sacred day. The walls are a tapestry in stone. Alongside expected crosses, you find carvings of ropes and knots, symbols of connection and the endless cycle. You see the pentagram, the five-pointed star, a universal symbol of microcosm and macrocosm. Most tellingly, you see a stunning fusion of motifs, Islamic-style arabesques intertwining with Celtic knots and Christian iconography. This is not the architecture of a purely Orthodox Catholic military order. This is the architecture of a syncretic spiritual tradition, one that absorbed, respected, and integrated the wisdom it found on its journeys. The octagonal floor plan, seen in many Templar chapels, is a key. 8 is the number of regeneration, of resurrection. It is the shape of baptismal fonts, symbolizing the new life. It is also the transitional shape between the square, representing the earth, and the circle, representing heaven. In building octagonal churches, the Templars were physically constructing a middle path, a bridge between worlds, and those green men, those foliate heads with leaves sprouting from their mouths. They are pre-Christian, deeply rooted in the fertility cults of Europe. Their presence in Templar churches suggests the order did not see ancient, earth-based spirituality as a threat to their faith, but as another facet of the same divine truth. They were building a new theology in stone, one that harmonized the celestial geometry of the East, the mystical naturalism of the old European world, and the framework of Christian chivalry. Their buildings were their true confession, a confession they could not burn. They tell us that whatever secret rites they practiced, they were likely rites of synthesis, aimed at experiencing the divine not through dogma alone, but through the harmony of number, the cycle of the stars, and the living pulse of the earth itself. If their archives were lost, their library still stands, written in geometry and waiting in the light. Deep in the Scottish countryside, a chapel stands as the ultimate cipher. Rosslyn Chapel, founded in the mid-15th century by William Sinclair, a nobleman of Norman and Scottish lineage, is a symphony in stone that plays a melody of secrets. From the moment you step inside, you are engulfed by a forest of carvings so dense and varied, it defies the very definition of a 15th century Christian church. There are angels and biblical scenes, yes, but look closer. Winding up from the floor is the breathtaking apprentice pillar, a masterpiece of spiraling stone vines and dragons that legend says was carved by a young mason who surpassed his master, paying for his genius with his life. But the true mysteries are carved in the margins. High on the arches, you can find clear, precise depictions of maize, or corn, and aloe vera plants. The problem is historical. Maize is native to the Americas. Rosslyn was completed around 1480, a full 2 years before Columbus set sail. How did a stonemason in Scotland know what a new world plant looked like? This anomaly fuels the persistent theory that the Sinclair family, and perhaps the Templar knowledge they guarded, had access to transatlantic navigational secrets long before the official age of discovery. The carvings do not stop with botany. The ceiling is a complex web of geometric patterns, stars, flowers, and symbols that seem drawn from every tradition under the sun. You can find Islamic-style motifs, Jewish stars, pagan green men, and Christian crosses, all intermingling in a silent, stone-born dialogue. This has led many researchers to call Rosslyn not merely a chapel, but a book in stone. If the Templars did preserve a body of esoteric, syncretic knowledge, a library too dangerous to keep on parchment, then encoding it into the very fabric of a sacred building would be the perfect safeguard. Fire cannot burn stone. The patterns could be a coded geometry, a three-dimensional map of sacred proportions, or even stellar alignments. The famous apprentice pillar itself is often interpreted not just as a beautiful column, but as a representation of the tree of life from Kabbalistic mysticism, or the world tree from Norse mythology, a symbol of the axis connecting heaven, earth, and the underworld. Could the entire layout of Rosslyn be a kind of spiritual battery designed to amplify a specific energy or preserve a vibrational truth? The theory that it is a repository gains weight when you consider its location. Scotland was a rumored safe haven for fugitive Templars after the Purge. The Sinclair family were historically connected to both the order and to the craft guilds of stonemasons. Building a chapel of such staggering, expensive complexity, filled with symbols from across the globe, suggests a purpose far beyond local worship. It feels like an act of preservation, a final, desperate effort to etch a dying wisdom into a permanent medium before the last guardians passed away. Rosslyn Chapel, therefore, is more than a building. It is a hypothesis in sandstone. It asks us a direct question. Is this the vault where the Templars, through their alleged Scottish heirs, finally deposited their treasure? Not gold, but a visual language of unity, a testament to a world far more connected and spiritually far more complex than the official histories of its time dared to record. The stone leaves of Rosslyn whisper of a world beyond maps, but another legend binds the Templars to an object of even greater power. In the early 1300s, a German knight and poet named Wolfram von Eschenbach composed his epic, Parzival. This was no ordinary Arthurian tale. In his version, the Holy Grail is not guarded in a remote castle by a lone king, but by an order of chivalric knights called the Templars. The name is unmistakable. These Templars, or men of the temple, live in a fortress called Munsalvesh, a spiritual stronghold. They are a disciplined, celibate order of warrior monks who serve the Grail, a mysterious stone that bestows sustenance and divine grace. Wolfram was writing at the very height of the historical Templars' power and prestige, just years before their sudden downfall. His fictional order mirrors the real one so closely that it cannot be coincidence. He presents the Templars not as historical figures, but as mythic guardians, planting an idea that would forever alter their legacy. But what exactly was this Grail they were sworn to protect? Wolfram's vision is crucial. He explicitly rejects the idea of the Grail as a chalice. In his poem, it is a stone, the lapsid exilis, a phrase scholars suggest may mean stone from the stars or stone of exile. This celestial rock provides endless nourishment and is inscribed with a text that changes, revealing the names of those chosen to serve it. This shifts the entire concept from a physical relic to something far more abstract and potent. It becomes a source of wisdom, a direct line to divine will, or even a living consciousness. This interpretation opened a door. In later centuries, particularly within French esoteric circles, a linguistic pun transformed the story. The old French term for the Holy Grail, Saint Graal, was subtly broken into Sang-Real, or royal blood. The legend pivoted. The Grail was no longer an object, but a lineage, the sacred bloodline of Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene, secretly preserved through history. The protectors of this dangerous genealogical truth, the Knights Templar, Their mission was reimagined, not to find a cup, but to safeguard a living secret that threatened the very foundation of the Church. This fusion of Templar history with Grail mythology created an irresistible alchemy. It provided a perfect symbolic answer to the lingering question of their true purpose. Their sudden wealth and influence could be explained by the patronage of this hidden lineage. Their secret rites and rumored idol worship could be reinterpreted as ceremonies venerating this sacred blood or the divine feminine principle it represented. Their persecution by King Philip and the Pope was no longer a simple land grab, but a desperate attempt by a corrupt institution to erase the living evidence of its own fabricated authority. The Grail, whether as stone, bloodline, or hidden knowledge, became the ultimate MacGuffin, the missing piece that made every bizarre detail of the Templar saga click into a grand, cosmic conspiracy. Their 9-year excavation on the Temple Mount was now a search for genealogical scrolls, not gold. Their architectural syncretism was an expression of this universal, pre-Christian wisdom. Their alleged survival in Scotland was to protect the last scions of the line. Every mystery found its answer in the glow of the Grail. Perhaps the most profound interpretation, however, is the most intangible. In some mystical traditions, the Grail represents not an external thing to be found, but an internal state to be achieved. It is the symbol of divine consciousness, of spiritual enlightenment, or a direct, unmediated experience of God. Viewed through this lens, the Templars' esoteric rites take on a new light. The shocking initiation, the symbolic denial of dogma, the ritual kisses, could all be seen as a harsh, transformative psychology. It was a method to shatter the initiate's conventional mind, to empty the cup of his old beliefs so that the new wine of a direct, personal gnosis could be poured in. Their guardianship was not of a physical object or a bloodline, but of a method, a path to that inner Grail castle. They became the keepers of a spiritual technology, a dangerous practice that promised enlightenment outside the Church's control. This idea transforms them from relic hunters into mystics, and their entire history becomes a shadow play of the soul's journey. The real treasure they guarded was never in a vault or a chapel, but in the potential of human consciousness itself, a secret so simple and so powerful that it had to be encoded in layers of romance, architecture, and blood. The path of the mystic often winds through landscapes declared heretical. To find the Templars in southern France during the 12th and 13th centuries is to place them on the border of a spiritual war. Here, the Cathar faith, also known as the Albigensians, flourished. The Cathars were dualists. They believed the physical, material world was not created by a benevolent god, but by a lesser, flawed deity often called the demiurge. This world was a prison, a trap for the divine spark within the human soul. Salvation, for them, came not through the sacraments of the Church, but through a secret knowledge, an inner awakening called gnosis. This knowledge revealed the true, distant God of pure spirit and showed the initiate how to free their soul from the cycle of reincarnation in this corrupt material realm. The Church saw this as a mortal threat and launched the brutal Albigensian crusade to eradicate it. Where do the Templars stand in this? Officially, they were Orthodox Catholic Knights. Yet, their commanderies were thick on the ground in the Languedoc region, the very heart of Cathar country. They were neighbors, landlords, and sometimes even protectors of these communities. For decades, they moved among people who believed the cross, an instrument of material torture, could not be a holy symbol of a spiritual God. To a Cathar, venerating the cross was akin to worshiping the prison bars. Now hold that thought and return to the central accusation against the Templars, that they were forced to deny Christ and spit upon the cross during initiation. Through a purely Orthodox lens, this is pure blasphemy, but through a Gnostic or Cathar-influenced lens, it takes on a radically different meaning. What if this act was not a denial of the divine Christ, but a ritual rejection of the material Christ, the physical incarnation trapped in the flawed world of the demiurge? The spitting might symbolize contempt not for the Savior, but for the physical symbol of his material suffering, the very suffering the Gnostics sought to transcend. It becomes a rite of purification, separating the initiate from attachment to the physical plane and its false god. This reinterpretation is explosive. It suggests the Templars may have absorbed a core heretical idea that the official church, with its hierarchy, its wealth, and its focus on physical relics and sacraments, was part of the problem, an institution of the material world, obscuring the path to pure spirit. Their secret knowledge, their gnosis, would then be a method to achieve a direct, personal connection to the divine, utterly bypassing the need for priests, popes, and penance. Their entire structure, a brotherhood of equals bound by an inner oath and secret ritual, mirrors the Cathar Perfecti, the spiritual elite who guided others toward enlightenment. This connection paints their persecution in an even starker light. The Albigensian Crusade proved the Church would use absolute violence to crush a spiritual competitor. A generation later, the Templar Purge could be seen as finishing the job, targeting a more powerful, more entrenched, and potentially more dangerous carrier of the same viral idea, that the soul needs no intermediary. The Templars, with their military discipline and papal protection, were a far harder target than the pacifist Cathars. If they had indeed been infected by this dualist gnosis, they represented a heresy armored in steel, a secret rebellion operating from within the very heart of Christendom's power structure. This theory does not require every Templar to be a secret Cathar. It only requires that their long exposure to these ideas, in a region vibrating with alternative spirituality, seeped into their own private rituals, creating a hybrid and deeply unorthodox practice. When the king's inquisitors finally broke down their door, they encountered rites they could not comprehend, performed by men who believed they were pursuing the highest form of Christian truth. The tragedy is that both sides spoke a different spiritual language. What the Templars may have seen as a sacred rejection of the material world, their accusers could only hear as the devil's work. Their world was not one of simple borders, but of profound exchanges. For nearly 2 centuries, the Templars were not just occupiers in the Holy Land, they were permanent residents, neighbors who shared the same sun, the same markets, and the same sacred geography with the Islamic world. To view their story through a lens of eternal conflict is to miss the quiet, transformative dialogues that happen in the spaces between wars. Among the most significant of these were their encounters with Islamic mystics, the Sufis. These were men who sought the divine not through dogma alone, but through love, poetry, music, and ecstatic practice. They gathered in spiritual brotherhoods called tariqas, living in communal houses much like monastic orders, under the guidance of a master. The parallels are immediate and striking. Like the Templars, Sufis emphasized a direct, personal experience of God, often expressed through repetitive rituals designed to quiet the mind and open the heart. Their core practice is dhikr, the remembrance, a rhythmic chanting of the names of God or sacred phrases, sometimes accompanied by controlled breathing or even sacred dance, as seen in the whirling dervishes. This practice aims to achieve a state of spiritual intoxication, of union with the divine. Now, listen to the echoes. The Templars' own rites, as distorted by their accusers, involved repetitive actions, solemn vows, and symbolic gestures performed in a closed circle of brothers. Could the core of their secret chapter meetings have been a form of Christian dhikr? A rhythmic, meditative practice of remembrance using their own sacred formulas, perhaps focused on the name of Christ or the mysteries of the Passion, designed to induce a collective spiritual elevation. The structure mirrors perfectly a closed, disciplined brotherhood led by a master, using ritual to transcend ordinary consciousness. Even the infamous cord finds a potential mirror. Many Sufi orders have specific practices involving girding oneself with a belt or cord during initiation, symbolizing the binding to the master and the path. The Templar cord, touched to their sacred symbol, could represent an identical concept, a physical tether to the spiritual lineage and its power. Perhaps most revolutionary is the shared approach to Scripture. Sufism is renowned for its symbolic and allegorical interpretation of the Quran, looking beyond the literal law to find inner mystical meanings. This is the essence of esotericism. If the Templars were exposed to this way of thinking, it could explain the development of their own hidden interpretations of Christian doctrine. Their alleged rejection of the cross could be reread through this lens, not as a denial, but as a Sufi-style allegory, rejecting the literal instrument of torture to embrace a higher, mystical understanding of sacrifice and resurrection. What emerges from this cross-cultural shadow is a startling possibility that the Knights Templar, in their most private chambers, were cultivating something we might call a Christian Sufism. They were a Western monastic knighthood, yet they may have been practicing an Eastern-inspired mysticism of the heart. Their long residence in the East provided the soil, their military discipline provided the structure, and their encounters with Sufi wisdom may have provided the seed, a seed that grew into a unique, syncretic spirituality too fragile to survive the rigid orthodoxies of either continent. This was not heresy born of malice, but wisdom born of proximity, a secret bridge between two worlds that official history was not yet ready to cross. Their revolutionary banking system was a fortress of practicality, but its design may have mirrored a spiritual architecture. A pilgrim traveling from Paris to Jerusalem faced not only bandits, but the sheer impossibility of carrying enough coin for his journey. The Templar solution was elegant and radical. He could deposit his funds at the Paris preceptory and receive a coded letter of credit, a piece of parchment whose value was not in the material it was written on, but in the trust and the network behind it. He would then travel lightly, protected by Templar patrols on dangerous roads, and present his letter at the Temple Mount in Jerusalem to receive his funds in local currency. This system was more than a financial convenience. It was a physical manifestation of a profound idea, the transmutation of value. It demonstrated that true worth was not in the heavy, corruptible metal, but in an intangible bond of trust and a flawless system of execution. In an esoteric sense, they were alchemists of commerce, turning base physical treasure into a flowing, spiritualized medium of exchange. Their entire network, a web of preceptories spanning from Scotland to Cyprus, functioned like a nervous system. And just as a nervous system carries both nutrients and information, could this financial network have carried more than money? The secure, trusted channels used to move letters of credit and bullion would have been the perfect, discreet conduit for moving something far more dangerous: ideas. A coded financial message could easily contain a coded theological one. A trusted brother traveling from a commandery in the Languedoc, steeped in Cathar thought, to the headquarters in Jerusalem, could carry reports, scrolls, or oral teachings under the perfect cover of official Templar business. Their economic infrastructure provided the ultimate camouflage for the transfer of knowledge, allowing a heterodox idea to travel across continents under the protection of the order's impeccable reputation for logistical secrecy. This links directly to their core symbolism. For the Templar, material treasure and spiritual treasure were not opposites, but reflections. The immense wealth they managed was not for luxury. It was fuel for their sacred mission, the protection of pilgrims and the Holy Land. In their worldview, managing this wealth efficiently and honestly was itself a sacred duty, a form of stewardship that mirrored their role as guardians of spiritual mysteries. Their financial genius granted them the very thing every esoteric group craves: independence, answering only to a distant pope, financially self-sufficient through their own international system. They were insulated from the pressures of local bishops and kings. This autonomy created a protected space, a sealed chamber within Christendom, where unconventional practices could be contemplated and refined. No local authority could audit their beliefs if they could not audit their books. Their economic power built the walls within which their spiritual experiments could quietly unfold, making their banking system not just the engine of their order, but the locked door to their secret chapter room. King Philip IV's treasury was empty, hollowed out by war and his own ambitions. The Templars were his bankers, and they held a fortune in promises he could not hope to repay. Crushing them was a brutal solution to a financial crisis, a way to cancel an impossible debt and seize the assets that backed it. Yet a simple bankruptcy does not require a spectacle of heresy. The king chose not to quietly dissolve a corporation, but to publicly demonize a sacred brotherhood. He needed more than their money. He needed to utterly destroy their credibility, their honor, and their very soul in the eyes of the people. This tells us the threat they posed was not merely economic, it was existential. An independent military order answering only to the Pope was a state within a state, a rival power center that could defy a king's will. By painting them as demon worshippers, Philip transformed a political rival into a spiritual enemy, guaranteeing popular support for his theft. But here lies the enduring mystery: why these specific, bizarre charges? Why force confessions about spitting on crosses and kissing idols? If the goal was simply to seize land and gold, any accusation of corruption or pride would have sufficed. The elaborate narrative of secret rites suggests Philip and his advisors were not inventing from whole cloth, but weaponizing whispers that already swirled around the order. The Templars were famously secretive. Their chapter meetings were closed, their rituals private. In an age of public faith, such privacy bred suspicion. The king likely seized upon these murmurs of strange, closed-door ceremonies and amplified them into a tale of satanic inversion. He exploited the public's fear of the unknown to make his crime seem like a holy duty. This leads to a chilling possibility. The suppression was not just a financial land grab or a political purge. It was an attempt to eradicate a competing spiritual authority. The Templars, with their rumored direct path to the divine, their alleged hidden knowledge, and their independence from local bishops, represented an alternative form of Christian power. They offered a model of faith that was experiential, perhaps mystical, and guarded by a warrior elite, not mediated through the traditional parish hierarchy. To a king who saw himself as God's anointed, and to a church increasingly centralizing its doctrine, this was a dangerous challenge. By destroying them with charges of heresy, Philip and Pope Clement were not just eliminating a debtor, they were burning a bridge to a different kind of Christianity, one they could neither control nor comprehend. The Friday the 13th arrests, therefore, stand as a dark fusion of motives. It was a financial hit, yes, but dressed in the robes of a spiritual inquisition. The king needed their wealth, but to take it without sparking rebellion, he first had to murder their reputation, using the very secrecy that may have guarded their most sacred truths as the rope to hang them. Centuries later, in the elegant drawing rooms and candle-lit lodges of 18th century Europe, the Templars found their most ardent resurrectionists. The world had changed, but the hunger for their legend had not. The Age of Enlightenment championed reason, yet it also sparked a powerful countercurrent, a fascination with ancient mystery, hidden wisdom, and the romance of chivalry. Into this fertile ground stepped Freemasonry, a fraternal order built on the symbolism of stonemason guilds, allegories of moral building, and, increasingly, a thirst for historical lineage. It was here that the historical warrior monks were systematically transformed into mythic archetypes. The most influential engine of this transformation was a German Masonic system known as the Strict Observance. Founded by a nobleman named Karl Gotthelf von Hund, it presented a breathtaking claim. Von Hund declared that Freemasonry itself was merely an outer shell, a disguise. The true inner authority of the craft, he taught, came from a direct, secret succession from the medieval Knights Templar. He spun an elaborate tale. He claimed to have been initiated into this hidden Templar Masonic continuity in Paris by an unknown superior, who was none other than the exiled Stuart Prince Charles Edward himself. According to von Hund's narrative, after the Purge of 1314, the surviving Templars went underground, preserving their esoteric rites within the operative stonemason guilds of Scotland and Europe. These guilds, over centuries, evolved into the speculative, philosophical Freemasonry of his day. The Strict Observance crafted elaborate new degrees, ceremonies where Masons could literally be knighted as Knights Templar within the lodge. They wore white mantles and red crosses, adopted Templar-style titles, and performed rituals steeped in the drama of persecution and secret restoration. This was not history. It was myth-making of the highest order, a pseudo-history that provided a thrilling, aristocratic pedigree for a young fraternity. Von Hund's system was wildly popular, but it was also built on sand. When pressed, he could never produce his mysterious superiors or any tangible proof of the succession. The Strict Observance eventually collapsed under the weight of its own unverifiable claims, but its legacy was permanent. It had successfully grafted the Templar narrative onto the growing body of Masonic symbolism. Other rites followed, like the rectified Scottish Rite and the York Rites Knights Templar degree, each adding layers to the story. This 18th century revival did something profound. It took the scattered, ambiguous fragments of the medieval trials, the whispers of Rosslyn, and the rumors of survival, and wove them into a coherent, attractive, and accessible tradition. The Templars were no longer just tragic historical figures or subjects of dark accusation. They were now spiritual ancestors, patron saints of a modern esoteric quest. The Masons provided a new language, a structured, symbolic framework through which the Templar myth could be lived and experienced by thousands of men across Europe and America. In doing so, they effectively constructed the modern esoteric image of the order. The Templar we envision today, the knight as mystic initiate, the guardian of arcane secrets within a fraternal brotherhood, is largely a product of this Masonic reimagining. It was a creative act of spiritual archaeology, building a magnificent cathedral of legend upon the few, fragile ruins of fact. Eliphas Levi stood at the crossroads of history and imagination. A former seminarian turned ceremonial magician, he gazed back at the scattered fragments of the Templar story and saw not a jigsaw puzzle, but a blueprint. His monumental work, Dogma and Ritual of High Magic, published in 1854, was an act of profound synthesis. He took the mangled accusations of Baphomet, the whispers of Templar rites, and wove them together with the intricate geometry of the Hebrew Kabbalah and the symbolic journey of the Tarot. In his hands, these disparate threads became a single, shimmering tapestry of universal wisdom. Levi declared that all true magic, all esoteric knowledge, was one. The Templars, he argued, were not heretics, but initiates into this ancient, unified tradition. Their alleged idol was not a demon, but a symbol, and so he gave that symbol its definitive form. The majestic, androgynous Baphomet he drew, with its torch of knowledge and its gesture of, as above, so below, was presented explicitly as the idol the Templars secretly venerated. This was a masterstroke of reinterpretation. Levi took the very evidence used to condemn the order and repurposed it as proof of their enlightenment. He was not uncovering history. He was creating a new mythos, one where the Templars became the heroic guardians of a perennial philosophy that the Church had forgotten. This is the crucial, often overlooked point. Much of what the modern world knows about Templar esotericism, the clean symbolic lines, the clear connections to older mysteries, the very image of Baphomet that sparks recognition, flows not from a dusty trial record, but from Levy's brilliant 19th century studio. He provided the template. He gave the chaotic medieval accusations a coherent, intellectual framework, transforming a story of persecution into a spiritual genealogy. For Levy, the Templars' true crime in the eyes of the Church was not spitting on a cross, but possessing a gnosis, a direct knowledge that made priests and popes unnecessary. Their destruction was the tragic victory of empty dogma over living experience. By framing them this way, Levy made the Templars eternally relevant to every seeker who felt confined by rigid orthodoxy. He turned their history into an allegory for the esoteric quest itself, a story where the pursuit of hidden truth is the highest calling, even if it leads to the stake. His work became the foundation upon which the entire modern occult revival was built, ensuring that when we peer into the mystery of the white-mantled knights, we are often seeing them through the symbolic lens he so artfully polished. The symbol Baphomet had been reborn as an icon of enlightenment, but darker forces would soon claim the Templar myth for their own. In the 1930s and 40s, the Nazi regime pursued a twisted form of occult archaeology through a unit called the Ahnenerbe, the Ancestral Heritage Society. These researchers, operating under Heinrich Himmler, were obsessed with proving the historical and mystical supremacy of the Aryan race. Their expeditions scoured the globe for legendary artifacts they believed could grant supernatural power, and the Knights Templar were squarely in their sights. Himmler, who saw himself as the reincarnation of a medieval German king, was fascinated by the order's combination of military discipline, secret rites, and alleged pre-Christian wisdom. He believed the Templars were not truly Catholic, but a Germanic knightly order that had preserved ancient Aryan secrets. The Ahnenerbe actively searched for Templar relics, documents, and even their supposed headquarters, hoping to uncover lost technologies or magical formulas to fuel the Third Reich's dominance. This grotesque appropriation showed the myth's terrible flexibility. It could be molded to serve an ideology of hatred, transforming guardians of spiritual knowledge into imagined prophets of racial purity. Thankfully, this chapter remained a dead end, a footnote of fanaticism that produced no great discoveries, only a chilling lesson in how history's mysteries can be poisoned. The Templar story needed a resurrection for the modern world, and it arrived not from an occult lodge, but from a bookstore. In 1982, 3 authors published a controversial work of speculative history titled Holy Blood, Holy Grail. Building on earlier French esoteric rumors, the book presented a stunning hypothesis as fact that Jesus Christ survived the crucifixion, married Mary Magdalene, and fathered a bloodline that continued in secret through European royalty, most notably the Merovingian dynasty of France. And the protectors of this explosive secret, the Knights Templar, according to the book, the order was founded not to guard pilgrims, but to excavate the Temple Mount for documents proving this lineage. Their entire history, their wealth, and their secret rites were all in service of guarding the sang real, the holy blood. The book was a sensation, blending pseudo-history, conspiracy theory, and detective story into a compelling, if widely debunked, narrative. It provided a slick, modern template that connected every dot: the 9-year excavation, the sudden wealth, the papal protection, the strange rites, and the brutal suppression, all in service of the greatest cover-up in history. This conspiracy framework was the perfect seed, and it found fertile ground in popular culture. 2 decades later, that seed blossomed into a global phenomenon. Dan Brown's 2003 novel, The Da Vinci Code, took the core premise of Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and wrapped it in a breakneck thriller. While the book is fiction, its factual preface and its weaving of real locations like Rosslyn Chapel convinced millions of readers they were learning hidden truths. Brown's portrayal of the Templars as the military arm of the secret society Priory of Sion, dedicated to protecting the Christ bloodline and the sacred feminine, became the dominant pop culture image of the order for a new generation. The novel's staggering success did more than sell books. It transformed the Templar myth from an obscure historical puzzle into household conversation. Suddenly, the questions were everywhere. Was the church built on a lie? Did the Templars know the truth? The massive public interest sparked documentaries, travel, and endless debate, proving that the human desire for a hidden story behind the official one was more powerful than ever. The historical knights were now fully eclipsed by their legendary counterparts, guardians of a secret that challenged 2,000 years of belief. As the conspiracy theories simmered, another, softer reinterpretation was taking shape within the New Age spiritual movement. Here, the Templars were stripped of their militarism and their ties to patriarchal institutions. They were reimagined as peaceful wisdom keepers, ecologists, and proto-feminists. In this view, their veneration was not for a bloodline, but for the divine feminine itself, for the goddess suppressed by the medieval church. Their alleged idol Baphomet was seen not as a devil, but as a symbol of sacred balance between male and female principles. Their architectural harmony with nature, their use of the green man, and their rumored mystical practices were cited as evidence they followed an earth-based, holistic spirituality. They became templates for the modern seeker, models of a spirituality that integrated action and contemplation, honored the feminine, and sought direct experience of the sacred in all things. This New Age adoption completed the Templars' symbolic journey. They had been warriors, heretics, bankers, masons, and conspiracy linchpins. Now they were gentle sages, a blank screen onto which every era projects its deepest spiritual longings and its sharpest critiques of power. Their true history may be locked in the past, but their myth is a living thing, forever being rewritten by the needs of the present. So what might a Templar have actually experienced behind the closed doors of a chapter meeting? Let us attempt a grounded reconstruction, weaving the threads we have gathered into a plausible tapestry of their private spiritual life. The ceremony would begin in the stark, Cistercian-inspired silence of their chapel, perhaps in the round nave of a place like the Temple Church. The brothers, having laid aside their swords, would stand or kneel in the geometric purity of the space, the octagonal floor beneath them, a constant reminder of the path between earth and heaven. Their practice likely started with the deep, contemplative prayer of their Cistercian roots, a meditation aimed at emptying the mind of worldly clutter, preparing the vessel. Then perhaps the atmosphere would shift, drawing from their long exposure to Sufi tariqas. A low, rhythmic chant might begin. It would not be a Gregorian hymn for a congregation, but a repetitive, mantra-like invocation, maybe of a sacred name or a phrase from the Gospel of John, designed to synchronize their breathing and lift their collective consciousness. This chanting, this Christian dhikr, would be the engine of their communal mysticism, moving them from contemplation into a shared state of heightened focus. At the heart of their gathering might lie a teaching, an inner commentary on Scripture, influenced by the Gnostic and Catholic ideas that permeated the Languedoc. This would not be a lecture on church law. Instead, a senior brother, a master, might offer an allegorical interpretation of a passion story or a parable. He might speak of the cross not as a physical object to be worshipped, but as a symbol of the soul's painful liberation from the material world. He might frame Christ's resurrection as an internal event, a gnosis to be realized within each night. This was the dangerous knowledge, the direct, experiential path to the divine that made priests and sacraments seem like unnecessary intermediaries. Following this, the ritual could incorporate their famed sacred geometry, a specific pattern, perhaps the pentagram carved in their Tamar chapter house or the proportions of their round nave, would be contemplated not as mere decoration, but as a key to the universe's structure. They might trace these shapes in the air or visualize them inwardly, using number and form as a ladder for the mind to climb toward the divine architect. The infamous cord around their waist was not a magical charm, but a tactile anchor to this reality, a personal tether to the lineage and the transformative work of the evening. Their secrecy, then, was not about hiding blasphemy. It was about safeguarding a fragile, direct encounter with God that the institutional church could neither provide nor control. To share these practices openly would have invited condemnation from theologians who traded in dogma, not experience. Their rites were a protected space where the warrior could lay down his armor and the monk could transcend his vows, aiming for a fleeting taste of unity that no battle could ever provide. This synthesis was their true heresy and their true treasure, a living spirituality forged in the crucible of the East, refined in the silence of the West, and ultimately destroyed for the threat it posed to the very idea that spiritual authority must always flow through a single earthly channel. The white mantle and red cross never truly faded from view. In the centuries following their Masonic revival, the Templar name became a powerful brand, a spiritual franchise claimed by a bewildering array of modern secret societies and esoteric orders. Each group, in its own way, seeks to wear the mantle, but the reasons and the methods vary dramatically, painting a fascinating picture of how ancient mysteries are repackaged for the modern soul. Perhaps the most influential and controversial of these claimants is the Ordo Templi Orientis, the Order of the Temple of the East, founded in the early 20th century. The OTO did not pretend to a direct historical lineage. Instead, under the guidance of the notorious magician Aleister Crowley, it performed a radical act of synthesis. It took the archetype of the Templar as mystical warrior and fused it with a new, shocking spiritual technology, sex magic. Crowley declared the OTO to be the true inheritors of the Templar spirit, not because they had a dusty charter, but because they pursued the same ultimate goal, spiritual liberation, through direct, experiential rites. In Crowley's system, the Templars' alleged secret was reinterpreted as a comprehension of sacred sexuality, as a path to divine union, a gnosis so potent it had to be concealed behind accusations of devil worship. Here, the Templar symbol became a badge of the ultimate spiritual rebel, a figure who used every aspect of human experience, even the most taboo, as a tool for enlightenment. Alongside such transformative reinterpretations exist countless Neo-Templar orders, from the sovereign military order of the Temple of Jerusalem to a myriad of smaller online and local chapters. These groups often split into two broad categories. The first are essentially historical reenactment societies, or Christian chivalric organizations. They focus on charity, ceremonial dress, and studying medieval history, wearing the regalia to honor an ideal rather than to practice secret rites. The second category makes a far bolder claim, an unbroken initiatic lineage. They speak of a hidden chain of Grand Masters passing the true light from Jacques de Molay through underground networks of Rosicrucians, Masons, and mystics, finally reaching their modern leadership. For these groups, the rituals performed today are not recreations, but the authentic continuation of those practiced in the 12th century chapter houses. The sheer persistence of these claims raises a compelling question. Why does this 700-year-old brand retain such magnetic power? For the spiritual seeker, the Templars offer a perfect archetype, the warrior monk. This is the ideal of the integrated individual, one who combines action in the world with a profound inner life. They represent discipline, sacrifice, and a direct, personal quest for the divine that bypasses institutional religion. To claim a Templar lineage is to tap into this powerful self-image. For the conspiracy theorist, the Templars are the ultimate proof, the original victims of a deep state operation. Their destruction by a king and a pope provides a historical template for every subsequent theory about hidden knowledge suppressed by the powerful. The fact that their story involves secret meetings, buried treasure, and a worldwide network makes them a ready-made protagonist for any narrative about a shadowy cabal controlling history. Ultimately, whether as a model for personal transformation or as a key to a hidden historical plot, the Knights Templar have transcended history. They have become a symbol, a blank slate upon which we project our deepest yearnings for meaning, our distrust of authority, and our eternal hope that somewhere, a secret brotherhood guards the keys to a truth greater than the world allows us to see. The search for a physical Baphomet idol has proven as elusive as the Knights themselves. Archaeologists have meticulously excavated Templar sites across Europe and the Near East, from their final fortress at Acre to the foundations of their Paris temple, now buried beneath a metro station. The findings are consistent and frustratingly mundane. They uncover the bones of horses, fragments of pottery, the rusted remains of nails and buckles, and the sturdy stone walls of commanderies built for utility and defense. There are no hidden chambers filled with strange statues, no crypts containing skeletal guardians clutching heretical gospels. The material record paints a picture of a highly organized, pragmatic military order, excellent stewards and builders, but one that left behind no obvious artifacts of secret worship. This absence is itself a powerful piece of evidence. It suggests that if esoteric rites existed, they required no special physical apparatus beyond the spaces they built and the minds of the brothers. Their temple was not in a reliquary, but in their ritual. The most compelling artifact we possess is not a carved idol, but a piece of parchment. The Chinon document, hidden in the Vatican archives for 7 centuries, is archaeological proof of a different kind. It is a forensic trace of the political and spiritual struggle that consumed the order. Its very existence, a secret absolution from the Pope that contradicted the public narrative of heresy, is a tangible clue to the profound ambiguity at the heart of the case. We can hold its digital facsimile, see the faded script, and know that in a room in Chinon, real men gave testimony that left the Supreme Pontiff unable to condemn them as outright heretics. This parchment is the smoking gun, not for secret rites, but for the undeniable complexity of the Templar phenomenon. It proves the official story was a lie, and in that crack of contradiction, all the legends have grown. While no chest of Gnostic scrolls has been unearthed, the architectural record speaks in a language more subtle than objects. The stones do not confess, but they suggest. The deliberate astronomical alignments at Tamar, the syncretic carvings at Rosslyn Chapel depicting flora from a continent unknown to its builders, the persistent use of octagonal and round forms echoing Eastern holy sites, these are not random aesthetic choices. They are a consistent pattern of symbolic communication. This pattern is anomalously rich compared to the architecture of other contemporary military orders like the Hospitallers. Templar sites display a markedly higher frequency of these esoteric, geometric, and natural motifs. It is as if their buildings were designed to function on 2 levels, one for the public observance of faith, and another, quieter level, for those who could read the geometry. This is the great tease of Templar archaeology. The evidence is everywhere and nowhere. It is in the alignment of a window to the solstice sun, not in a golden idol. It is in the silent sermon of a green man gazing from a capitol, not in a trial record. The proof lies not in a single definitive artifact, but in the haunting, cumulative weight of 1,000 suggestive details, a pattern that insists there was more to this story than prayer and battle. The stones whisper, but they never shout the secret. Perhaps the greatest secret the Templars ever guarded was not a doctrine, but a process. The real history of their esoteric rites does not lie neatly in the trial records or the Masonic rituals, but in the charged space between verifiable fact and undying legend. It exists at the precise intersection where their documented actions meet the centuries of speculation they inspired. They were, in all likelihood, a unique and volatile crucible. Picture a sealed vessel forged from 3 distinct elements. First, the white-hot iron of militant Roman Christianity, with its vows, its discipline, and its absolute sense of sacred mission. Into this was poured the quenching oil of Eastern mysticism, absorbed through decades of residence alongside Sufi brotherhoods and immersion in a land dense with ancient symbolic landscapes. Finally, there were traces of heterodox Western traditions, the Gnostic embers still glowing in places like the Languedoc, offering a vision of a divine spark within, free from institutional mediation. The heat of their circumstance, the constant warfare, the isolation from home, the immense responsibility of their dual role as bankers and protectors, fused these elements into something entirely new. Within their closed chapters, this synthesis may have crystallized into an internal, symbolic spirituality. It was a spirituality not of written creed, but of lived experience. The cross could become a symbol to be transcended, not out of hatred, but in pursuit of a higher, formless truth. A ritual kiss could be a transmission of spirit, not an obscenity. Their geometric architecture could be a meditative tool to elevate the soul to the outside world, and especially to the inquisitors who finally broke them. This nuanced, experiential faith was utterly incomprehensible. They had no framework for a Christianity that operated on multiple levels of meaning. They could only see the surface action and label it heresy. The spitting, the denial, the secret chord, these were not the devil's work, but a spiritual language tragically lost in translation. The brutal misinterpretation was then followed by a magnificent mythologization. Their destruction created a vacuum, and nature abhors a vacuum. Into that empty space flowed every repressed spiritual longing of the West. They became the blank screen for Rosicrucian dreams, Masonic lineage, Victorian occultism, and modern conspiracy theory. Each era dressed them in its own armor, from guardians of the Grail bloodline to prophets of the divine feminine. This endless reinvention is not a corruption of their story. It is the proof of its power. The historical Knights Templar, those 9 men who swore an oath in Jerusalem, are gone. But the Templar archetype they accidentally created is immortal. It endures because it answers a perpetual human question. Is there a deeper truth behind the official story? Is there a path to the divine that is personal, experiential, and hidden from the eyes of power? Their real history suggests that, for a fleeting moment, they may have believed they found it. And that belief, whether fact or fantasy, was enough to change the world forever. From the dusty, tortured confessions of 1314 to the glittering symbolic systems of the 19th century, we have traced a metamorphosis. The historical knights, bound by iron discipline and buried in pragmatic records, were slowly transformed into mythic vessels for every spiritual yearning of the Western world. Their enduring power does not spring from pure fiction, but from a potent kernel of truth. They were undeniably different. Their fusion of monk and soldier was unprecedented. Their financial network was a revolutionary secret in plain sight. Their chapter meetings were sealed to outsiders, and their long residence in the East placed them at a crossroads of ideas no other European institution occupied. This unique position, this profound otherness, became the fertile soil in which legends could take root. When the king's hammer fell, it did not shatter a simple story. It pulverized a complex reality, creating a cloud of fragments. Each generation since has sifted through those fragments, assembling a new mosaic that reflects its own deepest questions and desires. For the medieval church, the mosaic showed a demonic conspiracy. For the Enlightenment Masons, it revealed a noble lineage of enlightened builders. For the modern seeker, it depicts guardians of lost feminine wisdom or victims of the ultimate cover-up. The truth is likely more human and more tragic than any of these grand narratives. It lives in the quiet space between the accusations and the architecture, between what was said about them and what they built for themselves. They may have cultivated a private, experiential spirituality, a fragile synthesis born of war and wonder that was simply too strange to survive the rigid certainties of their age. So we are left with the reflection that has haunted us for 700 years. Does our fascination stem from the belief that they hid a terrible, earth-shattering secret, or is it something more poignant? Perhaps we are captivated because they seem to have pursued a sublime, personal truth, a direct encounter with the divine that remains just out of reach for so many, a whispered promise of a path less traveled. Their white mantles are mirrors. What do you see in them? A conspiracy, a heresy, or a forgotten ideal of the seeker knight? Share your theories in the comments below. And if you hunger for more journeys into history's hidden corners, subscribe and join us as we continue to explore the shadows where fact and legend forever intertwine.